if you take the totality of who we are as a human being, say the totality of whoever we are is 100%. What's your name? Lacey. So you said the totality of Andrew, the totality of Lacey was 100%. The evolutionary impulse, or what I call the authentic self, is the part of Lacey or the part of Andrew that has no doubt that he wants to be a free, enlightened person, that she wants to be a free, enlightened person. And that's the part of, that's the impulse towards consciousness in me or you, it's the unself-conscious, passionate impulse to become conscious, to become more conscious, right? Absolutely free from the fears and desires of my ego or your ego, right? That's the part of yourself when you get spiritually inspired. That's the part of you that wakes up. When you suddenly think, oh my God, it's really possible. You know, that kind of the passionate idealism that you can be overwhelmed by. It's those surges of it until it falls back into the cynicism and doubt. So the passionate idealism that you feel surging through your system, that's the authentic self. So, so let's say, for the average, for people who were generally quite interested in spiritual development, let's say the authentic self was 5% out of 100. That means the individual is basically 95% fears and desires of the individual and collective ego. The ego is not just an individual thing, it's a collective. It has to do with values, right? So let's say let's say for the individual, the authentic self, maybe it would be awake 5% in a context of being in a context of 95% fears and desires of the individual and collective ego, right? You could meet such an individual, let's say at a spiritual bookstore or somewhere, and maybe at a retreat like this, have the most incredible conversations with them, passionate, enlivened. You really meet soul to soul. But then as the years go by, you keep on having these conversations, but they never change. Why? Well, because that impulse is only 5% out of 100%, and the fears and desires of the individual and collective ego have all the power, right? And then it goes on. Let's say you meet somebody who's awake to the authentic self, 20%. Boy, you'll have conversations with and in a connection with that person that will really fire you up. It'll make those previous conversations with the other person seem like pale in significance because of the intensity. You almost felt God was entering the room when you were together, right? But still no change is going to happen because who's running the show? Still the ego. So for the other person who was 20%, it would mean 80% of still fears and desires of individual and collective ego are still running the show, in control, making the choices, right? So and on it goes. And so the way it works, in the way that I teach this, is that the transformation occurs, the meaningful transformation, that's not just a passing experience, only occurs when the individual has crossed the 49 to 50 to 51% threshold. So the individual has awakened to and become, therefore, not less than 51% authentic self. Only when the individual crosses the 49 to 50 to 51% threshold, it becomes nothing less than, at least at the bare minimum, 51% threshold. Any kind of measurable, demonstrable, and consistent evolutionary transformation, we can say, will not have occurred, because up until that point, the individual and collective ego and its overwhelming tendencies and impulses are still going to be the stronger part of the self. Get my point? And this answers the question, why can people who seem to know so much act so stupid? When you cross the 51% threshold, then the ego becomes the weaker half. And that's when absolutely everything changes. Okay? You got it? And the goal in my teaching is for the individual to do whatever on God's earth that they need to do to get to that, to cross that 50% threshold, to get to 51. Because once you cross 49 to 50 to 51%, you start feeling this tremendous thrust or backdraft behind you. Because you find it's the source of the creative impulse itself in the life process and in consciousness itself starts really driving you. You're not just running on your own will and intention anymore. There's a deeper and higher energy and intelligence that is catapulting you forward, right? That you experience on a daily basis.